Right. Assalamu alaikum. Let's get started with topic 5.3, that is influences on the curriculum. And when we talk about influences on the curriculum, the first thing, I'll just walk you through what all would we be doing today and then we start. Of course, when we talk about the influences on the curriculum, there the first thing that we all need to understand is how knowledge or your curriculum, it is a social construction. Curriculum being a social construct, everyone would agree to that, everyone does know that. But however, when we talk about knowledge being a social construct, that is something that requires a bit of discussion here. After we're done with discussing the social construction of knowledge, we talk about the different factors that, of course, if knowledge is a social construct, there would be some or the other factors that would be influencing knowledge, right? And what is it that can possibly influence knowledge? In this case, we speak about power. I mean, does anything anyone want, is it true that it would be considered as knowledge? No, right? There's someone who has to be powerful enough. Your status matters when it comes to the social construction of knowledge. Likewise, your economic development, your gender is a contributory factor when it comes to the social construction of knowledge. We'd speak about all of these factors that have their role in terms of the development of knowledge. Moving on, we'd speak about the Steiner schools, we'd speak about the movie Three Idiot. We'd speak about progressive learning. We'd move on and we discuss education and cultural reproduction. And while discussing education and cultural reproduction, we'd discuss how our the content that students study, it is ethnocentric. Now, I'm assuming everyone sitting over here does know what ethnocentrism is. And knowledge or the content that we study being ethnocentric is pretty much it pretty much reflects in the syllabus that we're studying. Likewise, we'd move on, we'd speak about how your curriculum plays an important role in terms of the development of cultural reproduction, right? आपके culture को curriculum कैसे reproduce कर रहा होता है? I'm sure you do have an idea about where all Marxism would fit in. That's pretty much it. This is going to take us around 2 hours and here and there. Let's get started. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. We're talking about the influences on curriculum, topic number 5.3, A2 Sociology syllabus. To start off with, what is a social construct? Anything that the society comes up with is a social construct. Anything that the society constructs is a social construct. And when we talk about knowledge, the question is, as much as the people, I'm sure there are a lot of people who either haven't given a thought to this, but there would be someone who would be assuming that knowledge is probably something that's absolute. Knowledge isn't really absolute, because had it been absolute, it would have been the same for everyone across the globe. If you question yourself, that isn't what happens, because what's considered to be knowledge in one part of the world might not be considered as knowledge in another. Likewise, when we speak about the significance that is given to one particular form of knowledge in one part of the world is again different from the significance it receives in another. If I talk about a comparison between simple tribal societies, and if we compare them with metropolitan cities, complex societies, we know the idea that people hold about knowledge is very different. So I think that's enough as a basic for us to start off with. That's enough for us to understand and accept that knowledge is not something that's absolute, however, it is a social construct. If knowledge is a social construct, don't you think there'd be different factors that would influence knowledge? Like I mentioned a couple of minutes back, not anything anyone says turns out to be knowledge. You need to be powerful enough in the society to make a point that whatever you believe is correct is knowledge. And then I I'm sure you do, or you would accept this, agree to this, that there are so many factors that could bias knowledge, right? That could I mean, your gender, your ethnicity, your social class, your culture, your history, your background, your belief system, your region, your religion, your values, all of this is eventually going to affect the knowledge that is being created, or in other words, social construction of knowledge. As Weber puts it here, according to Weber argued that all societies develop beliefs about what is worthy of being known. There are things that are worthy of being known, that are considered to be worthy of being known in one part of the world, which might not be true in another. There are so many things that, even if you talk about the rural areas of our country, if you go to the rural areas of our country, you'd see so many things that are considered to be an essential there, but they hardly have any significance if we move on towards to the urban world, if we move on towards the more developing or developed countries in the world, right? So, to start off with, the social construction of knowledge. Social construction refers to something, no, social construction of something refers to how something is constructed by the society, and it is not something that naturally exists, right? Like I said, when I had said knowledge is not absolute, this is what I was talking about. In this topic, we should discuss how knowledge is a social construction. If knowledge would have been absolute, it would have been the same for everyone everywhere. However, we all do know that there are certain things that are considered to be worthy of knowing in one society and not the other. For example, in tribal society, something considered to be knowledge might not hold the same amount of significance in a modern complex society. This is what I was just discussing a couple of minutes back. And again, if knowledge is a social construction, that means that there would be several factors contributing towards the social construction. If take an example of how knowledge is used in the education system, what kinds of knowledge should be taught, to whom, and for what purpose? That's again very important over here. What kind of knowledge should be taught, to whom, and for what purpose? Let's talk about this. This will take a couple of minutes, but this might make it interesting for you all. As you all know, your syllabus has changed. It has recently changed. The changes haven't been a lot, but nonetheless, there have been changes. Your paper structure has changed, right? Since as we speak, it's the 28th of March, 2021, a Sunday. You know, the way things were, I'm giving an example. I'm trying to give an example over here that helps you relate to this in a better manner. The way, I mean, who gets to decide what should be taught to A2 sociology students and what not? Do you have any say here? Do I have any say over here? Your syllabus, the last it changed was in 2014, I very well remember, and then in 2021. And I don't know if you guys even know this, but pre 2014, yeah, pre 2014, the CAI used to test the unit family in A2s, and there were other units like crime and deviance, there were other units like work and leisure. And the unit crime and deviance, for the ones who have done O-level sociology, you do know what I'm talking about. The thing is, if all of this changed, who gets to decide that? What is the purpose behind changing it? What are the what is the apparent purpose, and what are the real or true intentions? And then of course there are different sociological perspectives that we could bring in over here. Likewise, how is knowledge to be tested? Or something as simple as are exams happening or are they not happening? Would the CAI examinations take place or would they not take place? Who gets to decide that? Do you? Do I? No, we don't. There's someone who's more powerful. There's someone whose power, prestige, status, who's actually at an authoritative position to get to decide what happens and how. The Our government recently, with the CAI, decided or have finally come up to a conclusion that the O levels examinations would get postponed and the A level examinations wouldn't. Don't you think all of this has to do with social construction, the testing mechanisms, the paper structure? Right now, as we speak, we're doing education over here. That happens to be P3. And then we have P4 that has three more units out of which you're supposed to study any two. We have globalization, we have religion, we have media. The unit that we refer to as globalization today, I remember we used to call it global development till the last year. I didn't decide to change this. The unit, there used to be a single paper for A2. Now we have two papers, paper 3 and paper 4. For the ones who think they've made it difficult, no, they've not. They've made it easier, rather. It used to be a 3 hour paper, and I know students who used to have a clash because of which they had to write for more than 3 hours straight in one go with probably 10-15 minutes break in between. So, if anything, they've made it simpler for you. Now, this paper that you'd sit for, paper 3, only tests you on your knowledge on education. Moreover, it not only tests you on your knowledge on education, it's there's a particular way through which you're supposed to write your answers. If you're not writing your answers the way you're expected to write your answers, if you're not writing your answers the way the CAI wants you to write your answers, you're not getting your marks. Like we discussed in the last class, bowels and genders, according to them, the new marks is it's it's your it's not your ability or your intelligence that is being tested. Now, I'm not saying this, bowels and genders. It's not your ability or your intelligence that is being tested over here. It's your conformity. It's your conformity towards the subject that's probably being tested over here. You're supposed to write the way they want you to write. You adhere to it, you get your marks. You do not adhere to it, you don't get your marks. It's as simple as that. It's very simple. We have generic marking schemes before we have specific marking schemes. Give them a read. I'd rather share a video with you all today that would explain you how to go about with different questions from paper 3. You know, it's I hope you guys can all relate to what all we're doing right now and how you are being affected with all of this. Now, moving on, let's not drag this further. Moving on with Weber. Weber argued that all societies develop beliefs about what is worthy of being known. This suggests that knowledge is not something that is simply out there waiting to be discovered, right? I mean, many people, like I said, I have either never given it a thought or they probably assume that it's knowledge is something that's simply out there, we discover it, and that's how things go about. That's probably not the case. This suggests that knowledge is not something that's simply out there waiting to be discovered, taught, and learned. One context of for understanding this idea is to look at how knowledge is socially constructed in education system. Now let's talk about how knowledge is actually socially constructed in the education system here, right? Let's move on and discuss the factors that influence the content of the curriculum. We talk about the role power plays, we talk about the role status has, culture, economic demands, and gender, right? Now, for few, we discuss things in detail. For others, we just simply skim through them. And of course, when you talk about power and status, I think this comes without saying. It's the Marxist perspective that we'd be bringing in over here. I want everyone to read through this. Once you're done reading through this, we proceed. If we talk about, now that you're done reading, you'd probably understand this in a better manner. Now, like I had said, we would be bringing in the Marxist perspective over here to discuss the factors that influence the content of the curriculum, right? Discussing factors that influence the content of the curriculum. Of course, a formal education system, like you've all read, is a requirement. It's a done thing. I mean, this is something no one would want to argue upon, because the rapid amount of growth in terms of technology, industries, the society as a whole is changing today, and there has to be a formal system through which all of this is being taken care of. And things are beyond the times when students used to be, or when pupils when children used to be taught at home, right? According to the Marxist perspective, power and control within schools is influenced by the nature of economic relationships in society, in capitalist societies. Now we're talking about the nature of economic relationships in capitalist societies playing their role in terms of determining what is taught to students, how it is taught to students, and many other things. Now, when we talk about, or as we talk about the nature of economic relationships, you've seen how the world has transformed in the last year and a half, and things are very different today from the way things were earlier. There are so many new businesses that have developed, and there are so many businesses that had to be shut down. There were so many businesses, or there was so many things that could have been taken care of from home, which pre the pandemic no one even gave a thought to, or even if you did, it never got as popular as it is today. And as the nature of economic relationships has changed today, right, especially in the last year and a half, don't you think this is going to, I mean, as soon as everyone gets over this pandemic, inshallah, soon, you'd see how the way things are done or taken care of changes. If you still don't get this, the class I'm taking right now, the class that you're attending right now from your place, we never, I mean, I at least did not ever do this pre pandemic. And this is eventually going to affect the education system as well, right? Moving on, education systems contribute to cultural reproduction. As we refer to cultural reproduction, we had spoken about this in the last class as well. Cultural reproduction has to do with, it's a Marxist concept of or idea. We had the idea over here is that the rich, the elite, the middle class culture, because it's the middle class culture on which this education system runs and relies, it is reproduced through the education system. In other words, the according to the Marxist perspective, again, the rich make a point that their children continue to be rich and the poor stay where they are, right? Now, for Althusser, the gentleman who came up with the concept of ISA, that is ideological state apparatus, again, is the mechanism that is used by the state, the mechanisms that are used by the state to change the ideology of individuals. Now, as we refer to the mechanisms that are used to change the ideology of individuals, in this case, yeah, the mechanisms that are used by the state to change the ideology of individuals, there are numerous. I mean, we could talk about the religion playing that role, we could talk about the media playing that role. In this case, we're talking about education playing its role to change the ideology of a common man, a layman, right? For Althusser, cultural reproduction involves the ability of the ruling class to pass on its political and economic domination from one generation to the next. Education, in this case, is an example of an ISA. and is an important institutional mechanism for social learning. According to this, we've studied earlier as well. According to the Marxist perspective, teachers in this case are agents of ideological control who transform pupils' consciousness by trying to get them to accept the realities of the world and their likely future social positions. Now, the question is, how is it that a student's view about this, about the world, overall changes? We could do that. That happens through formal learning. Kids are taught they're given the knowledge, they're taught the skills that are essential for them to know when it comes to them fitting into the workplace, right? It, in other words, your formal learning has a very important contribution towards the requirement of the workplace. Number two, access to knowledge is restricted, right? Access to knowledge is restricted, and this all of this happens through a very tight control over the curriculum. I don't remember teaching anyone work and leisure or crime and deviance post 2014. The If the paper structure, if the content does not require that, we wouldn't, right? The higher an individual goes in the education system, the greater the access to knowledge. Now, for the ones who've studied O-level sociology, the amount of knowledge that you were given back in O-levels, if you compare them, if I'm sure, I have a feeling, I'm not sure, many of you would have opted for education as a unit. If you did, you don't you think you feel a very significant difference over here? The amount of knowledge that you were given back then in O levels is very different from the amount of knowledge that you receive here today, right? And all of this happens step by step, right? The access that you have, that a student has to knowledge, is pretty restricted, right? You need to pass one phase to get to another, to another, to another, to another, right? So access to knowledge is restricted through the control of the curriculum. Number three, preparing children for the differing levels of knowledge in the workplace means creating different levels of knowledge. Now, the education system is very smartly designed and developed in a manner that an individual needs to get through one phase to get to another, to another, to another, to another, right? Moving on, academic or theoretical knowledge, let's highlight this. Differing levels of knowledge, yeah. Number four, academic or theoretical knowledge has always been considered or given more significance if you compare that with practical knowledge. I'll give you a simple example over here. What if I talk about a mechanical engineer? What if we talk about an engineer who's driving on a highway, the car breaks down? There's hardly anything that the engineer can do to fix that car. If it's anyone who would be able to fix it, it would be a motor mechanic, right? Though nonetheless, it is for the education system, it's for the, according to the Marxist perspective, it's for the rich, the elite, the powerful people who get to decide what gets more power, what gets more significance. And in this case, it is academic knowledge, academic or theoretical knowledge is considered to be more important than practical knowledge. You didn't decide this, I didn't decide this. The people who've set up this system did. And according to the Marxist perspective, they, the rich, the elite, the bourgeois, right? Let's highlight this as well. Number five, some forms of knowledge are more valid than others. For instance, there are some subjects, even when we talk about A levels, there are some subjects that have more of what's the word for it, they have more of I mean, they have more, they consider to be more value, their credits, they have more credits, right? There's some subjects that are more credits than others, and who gets to decide that, right? Now, some form of knowledge are more valid than others. The next one, children must learn to accept authority, right? Because this is what it is going to be required by the workplace that they eventually would join. And the last one, commodification, the idea of commodification. Knowledge is given an economic value, knowledge is bought, knowledge is sold. And I don't think I need to explain all of this, right? Now, once we're done with discussing this slide, moving on to another, having a look at what Young has to say. According to Young, educational knowledge always has an ideological dimension. Educational knowledge always has an ideological dimension, right? Ideological dimension. There's an ideology that is running in the background when, or that is there when it comes to setting up syllabuses, developing curriculum, deciding what the paper structure would be like, right? Knowledge is socially constructed from a particular point of view for a particular purpose. For instance, knowledge is categorized into different subjects. Now, when you talk about knowledge being categorized into particular subjects, I teach this subject, I teach another, and I don't think I even mention the other subject that I teach. I mean, I teach psychology, but I hardly talk about psychology when I'm teaching sociology, unless it's a slip of tongue. The point is, knowledge is kept categorized or separate from one another, right? If you're studying business, your business teacher would be referring to business. If you're studying sociology, your sociology teacher would like to stick to sociology. If you're studying mathematics, so is the case with mathematics. And this is a very important tool. This is a very important tool, making a point that no one gets access to all, right? Remember, we're studying all of this under the Marxist perspective, right? According to this, this is a very important tool that the rich have, that ensures that they continue with their power and domination, right? While if knowledge wouldn't have been categorized, things would have been so different. Not everyone. Now I'm sure the you're all sitting over here, there'd be someone who would have business and econ as other subjects, there'd be others who would probably have mathematics, there'd be others who probably have psychology and English, right? So no one gets access to all. They categorize knowledge, right? Everyone gets a bit of what they opt for or what they're allowed to, and others get another. There are few subjects that might be common in between, but then again, not everyone is studying everything. One. Number two, the way knowledge is presented to you, the presentation of knowledge, like I said, plays a very important role. I just gave you an example a couple of minutes back. The unit global development has recently been changed to globalization. It's not only presentation. Yes, I do know there are changes in the service as well. However, nonetheless, presentation of this knowledge, it is being decided by the one who's sitting at the top. And teachers over here in this case play a very important role as gatekeepers. They choose what to talk about, what not to. I do that. I'm supposed to do that. Let's make it like that, right? Teachers end up revealing certain types of knowledge. They also choose which students receive what knowledge. There are students whom, I mean, this would take this entire discussion to another dimension over here. However, there are some students that a teacher feels, oh, they'd be done with all of this already. Let's give them something more. And that's something more, that extra information, that or that extra access to knowledge that you're providing to some students and not all, again, is because a teacher is expected to teach in a manner that deals with mixed ability learners, right? And when we speak about mixed ability learners over here, not every student is or would be able to grasp excess or excess amount of knowledge. And yeah, I think that pretty much explains it. The third point, knowledge is validated through examination. Now, just because you've read something, that doesn't at all mean you, I mean, imagine you complete your syllabus, you read through everything, you send the CI an email that you've covered your syllabus and they grade you accordingly. Things would be so different in that case. Does that happen? No, that doesn't. There's a proper validation process that you all have to go through. There's a proper date you get, and you need to prepare yourselves according to those dates. You have to write things the way they expect you to write. If you do not meet those expectations, you're not graded. So just access to knowledge isn't enough. You need to be able to get it. I mean, you're supposed to get it validated from the examination boards. Moving on, according to Young, the formal school curriculum reflects interests of ruling class and society, capitalist societies in the way that knowledge is number one, selected, number two, it is stratified. When I talk about selection over here, this involves decisions about which subjects appear on the curriculum. Now, there are subjects that were once there a part of our curriculum which aren't anymore. I didn't decide that, the CI did. And they're stratified, they're arranged, they're categorized in a manner that the rich, the elite wanted them to be like, right? I've I'm done discussing this. I'd want everyone to read through this. The second device got disconnected. I'll just fix this in a minute. If we take this a step further, let's talk about an alternative approach to learning. And as we refer to this alternative approach to learning, I'd like to speak about the movie Three Idiot, like I had mentioned. I'm sure quite a lot of you must have watched the movie, or you do know what I'm talking about over here. Now, when we talk about this movie, the Three Idiot, no, Three Idiot, yeah, the Three Idiot or Three Idiot, whatever it was, you all do have an idea about. I mean, the idea, the philosophy on which the entire plot was based about was about an alternative to the current education system, or the way the education system is structured now. It was in opposition to it. And to talk about that movie, it I don't know if you know this. I must have, since this is revision, I must have mentioned it earlier. It's there's this person with the name Sonam Wangchuk. You can Google him. There are his videos there that are on YouTube as well. Sonam Wangchuk from Ladakh, India. He is someone who, I mean, there are many people who say this movie Three Idiot is based on his idea of schools not being run the way they typically do run. You know, if you talk about Sonam Wangchuk's philosophy, I'd like to say his philosophy is based on the idea of progressive learning. Now, what is progressive learning? When you talk about progressive learning, and we can even link it up to the liberal perspective on education, since it's like, see, since it's not really a part of your syllabus, we don't even mention it. And the idea is, I'll put it in front of you in a simplistic manner. Number one, every child is uniquely amazing, and every child has a potential. It's for the education system to discover that potential and to further enhance it. And progressive learning approach is strictly against the idea of rote learning. And I repeat that again, against the idea of rote learning. Every child has potential. It's the education system's responsibility to discover that potential and to put it to use, right? You know, this idea has been tried at some schools as well. Fortunately or unfortunately, it did not work out well, because as much as you claim or you think rote learning shouldn't be there, I mean, I feel that too, but you know, at some point, rote learning has to be there. And for instance, let's just say, you knowing the alphabets A to Z, you didn't understand them, you had to rote learn them. Or basic numerics, numbers 1 to 10, 100, you learn them first, and then you teach them to a child first. And no, you make a child learn them first, and then you teach them, okay, see, after 10 comes 11, or after 100 comes 101, right? So this is a basic on the progressive learning system. And I gave you an example of Sonam Wangchuk. The movie spoke about the movie Three Idiot. Now, getting back to what our syllabus requires us to know, we're talking about Steiner schools, which is pretty similar to the type of schools that Mr. Sonam Wangchuk advocates. That is based on progressive learning, where where the uniqueness of the child is emphasized on, and any systematically designed system that is set up with the assumption that it would fit into the requirements of all is denied totally. Right now, Steiner schools as an alternative approach to learning. Steiner schools are an example of an alternative approach to learning and the curriculum that produces a different kind of message about education. In Steiner schools, the curriculum reflects the needs of the child at each stage of the development. Number two, children enter classes according to the age rather than their academic ability. Subject material is presented to an individual way that aims to interest the learner. Presentation in a manner that aims to interest the learner. Number four, children are encouraged to discover and learn for themselves instead of following a particular path that has been set up for them by authorities or the ones who develop the curriculum and system. Learning involves the development of practical, emotional, and thinking capabilities. Now, I think I've spoken about progressive learning and how this system is different. I think I don't need to explain much over here because you all can compare what is written over here with the system that you're a part of. And I'm sure you can relate to it and would agree to the differences that are there. If you could Google this, YouTube this, you would get to know so much about this system. Yes, there are some parts of the world where this is followed, but there are others who claim had this been that successful, it would have been adapted by everyone, right? So there is, it's questionable, it can be argued on, and it's debatable. Again, if you sprinkle a bit of Marxism, that would take you to another dimension. So yeah, moving on. Now, when we spoke about the factors that influence our curriculum, the demands of economy play a very important role over here. Right now, if I talk about the functions perspective, like we had discussed in the last class, according to the functions perspective, the education system sifts, sorts, and grades individuals so that they could to the allocate them to the roles that they are supposed to be performing in the society, right? You could, I'd like to remind you all about Davis and Moore. I'd like to remind you all about the idea of role allocation that you study under the heading of the functionist perspective. So according to the functionist perspective, the demands of economy are being met when it comes to the development of a curriculum. And you know what, I mean, this says this over here, the recent changes in curriculum for A-level sociology. If you do get a chance, which I always advise students to, you if you're reading this and if you're reading through the changes in the curriculum, if you're reading through the curriculum, right, it shows you how they talk about, they as in the CI, they talk about bringing in changes to meet the demands of the changes that are there in the society. And I just show that to you. Now, if you have a look at this slide, see, this is about the changes that have been made to the A-level sociology syllabus, right? The what if you have a look at the proper, I mean, the entire PDF that has your syllabus on it, you'd see how the CI, that is, they talk about bringing in all the changes so that the requirements or the demands are met according to the day and age, right? And so, once discussing this, we move on towards another factor. Gender again has an important role to play when it comes to the development or to the development of content for a particular subject. We all do know there are different subjects where male students hold the monopoly, and then we have students where female students hold the monopoly. There are different subject choices, there are different preferences, there are some sociological commentators who would like to refer to this as a stereotypical subject choice. There are others who would like to label subjects as being purely masculine or purely feminine subjects. But even if we keep all of that aside, I'm sure you have witnessed how A level mathematics classes are dominated by male students. And when it comes to social sciences, it's the other way. right? Though different subjects are associated with males, masculine and females, and this influences the choice some students take about which optional subjects to study and their attitudes to the subject. Different subjects are associated with males and females. Vocational subjects are particularly strongly gendered, so that for vocational subjects, students are often taught in a single sex classroom or ones dominated by one sex. For instance, if you talk about something that has more to do with knitting and cooking, you would probably have female dominated classes. If there are classes that they have more to do with the mechanical work, there would be more of males over there, right? Number three, teachers tend to teach different materials within a subject or to teach it differently depending on whether they're teaching boys or girls or both, right? Again, that's another factor that has to be kept in mind. Now, moving on, we speak about the relationship between education and cultural reproduction. As we speak about the relationship between education and cultural reproduction, and if we talk about ethnocentric curriculum, if we talk about gendered curriculum, and then further we move on to discussing the hidden curriculum. The first thing first, let's talk about the curriculum being referred to as ethnocentric. Now, when we talk about the curriculum being ethnocentric, we need to know what the word ethnocentrism means. Ethnocentrism has to do with being ethnocentric. Ethnocentrism has to do with the way a particular culture is shown to be dominant over others, or shown to be at times in a very direct manner, at times in a subtle manner. It's shown to be how it's better than the rest, right? And when you talk about ethnocurriculum over here, curriculum over here, if you talk about UK in particular, UK is a multicultural country. People from different cultures and ethnicities live in UK, and nonetheless the curriculum, if let's just say you belong to a member of an ethnic minority, you migrate to the UK, you belong to a community, to an ethnicity that happens to be a minority in a particular country, how do you feel studying about the supremacy of a particular culture that is alien to you? How would you feel if your subjects, if the content that you study talks a lot about someone else's ethnicity and culture, and how amazing they are, and how their traditions, customs, and cultures are better than the rest, while at the same time your own culture is totally being ignored? If you still don't get this, studying over here, as we speak, we keep on discussing. Every now and then I bring on the UK's education system. I mean, I have to, I'm supposed to. That's how our syllabus rolls. But then again, studying over here in Pakistan, how many times have you heard me, or have you read about your own education system? I mean, if you're studying education and a subject like sociology, don't you think you should be knowing about the education system that runs in your country, your society? Does that happen? I don't think it does, right? Now, that's one dimension. If you talk about another, there are many cultural clashes, there are many instances where conflict can arise. There are many there are many instances where this ethnocentric curriculum can end up creating divisions in the society, right? And even let's just say, if the subject, if the curriculum is, they try designing the curriculum in a manner that it reflects more of tolerance towards members of ethnic minority. As we speak, theoretically, everyone keeps on talking about not being racist. Theoretically, yes, but imagine someone from an Afro Caribbean origin studying about how racism is bad, and studying about how the content and the curriculum should be not should not be ethnocentric and should be neutral rather. I mean, theoretically, yes, it works out well. But then again, when they step out of school, what they realize is all of what has been taught to them at school just happens in books, just happens when the teacher speaks. If they compare that with their own experiences that they have out on streets in the society in general, they might experience a clash. They might witness a clash between what is being taught and advocated from what actually happens. Right now, the ethnocentric curriculum over here, the ethnocentric curriculum is usually based on the values that are dominant in a society, based on the values that are dominant in society, and these are likely to be those of the that's supposed to be of the majority ethnic group. In a multicultural society, the content of the curriculum may be based on the cultural norms, values, beliefs, and history of a single ethnic group to the exclusion of those. Now, let's make it like this. In a multicultural, let me underline this for you all. In a multicultural society, the content of the curriculum may be based on cultural norms, values, beliefs, and history of a single ethnic group to the exclusion of those of minority groups. Students from minority groups may experience a curriculum as not relevant. For example, students from a minority background may find that the content of a lesson does not include their own history or literature or reduces their worth at the expense of the majority culture. The formal subject content ideas about democracy. Now, we speak about democracy, we speak about racial equality, like I just mentioned a couple of minutes back. I mean, theoretically, it works out well, quite amazing. However, realistically speaking, if you step into how things are, I mean, if you have a look at the ground reality, things turn out to be pretty different from how they have been advocated at school. Though, for example, may clash with the learned experiences of minority students. That's again another factor. We were speaking about education and cultural reproduction. What I said was we discuss the this under the heading of ethnocentric curriculum. We discuss gendered curriculum, and next we'd speak about hidden curriculum. It's here somewhere. Yeah, hidden curriculum. Right now, let's talk about gendered curriculum and let's discuss this in a bit of detail. So this starts here and this goes all the way to the one, two, three, four, four more slides. Right now, when you talk about there being a gendered curriculum for feminists, okay, let's start off with an example that's relatable. You know, let's start with sociology. I've been doing this since quite a while now, quite a while. And we used to, I mean, we do refer to female sociologists, but mostly we refer to them when we're studying family or when we're studying gender inequality. The question is this it? I mean, have female sociologists only worked on these very few aspects? Probably not, right? I mean, until recently I came across, if you have a look at your Cambridge Indoors book, there's a female sociologist in the first chapter, and it was quite a change. I mean, this is something I never witnessed. There's this book, and then there was this book before that by this is by Jonathan Blundell and Chris Livesey. The last one was by Chris Livesey. The one before that was by Andy Burnett and Mike Kirby. And since the last 10-15 years, you hardly come across female sociologists when you're talking about the philosophical end. Yeah, if when you talk about inequalities in terms of education, in terms of religion, in terms of media, in terms of family, that is, I mean, you come across a lot of female sociologists and feminists there. But generally, when you talk about the philosophical end, you hardly came across any sociologists, right? So that's one factor again. Though for feminists, the way economies are structured sends a message to students about how different occupations are gendered. You know what? this subject choice today this subject choice today does end up affecting your career options tomorrow, right? A very simple example: if you do not have biology as a subject today, tomorrow you cannot think of joining a school that deals with medicine, right? A medical school, medical college. However, So is the case. If you do not have math as a subject, if you do not have physics, you might your options, your options for being an engineer tomorrow get restricted. Now the question is, no, there's no question. Now the point that I'm trying to make over here is, if we do see how subject choice today affects your career options tomorrow, don't you think the entire channel needs to be worked on? Right? For feminists, the way economies are structured sends message to students about how different occupations are gendered. This translates into gendered curriculum choices in terms of the most popular choices. Girls, as a result, often choose subjects such as English, psychology, art and design, sociology, and media studies. Boys, on the other hand, choose subjects such as physics, business, geography, physical education. This difference in subject choice at school level translates into differences at undergraduate level and further translates into career choices and career options, right? Taking this a step further, if we have a look at what Self-Nzili has to say. According to Self-Nzili, we see more women than men studying subjects that have to do with medicine, such as nursing, more women. More men than women study subjects such as business and administrative services, engineering and technology subjects, and computer sciences, right? Now, if we have a look at the Equal Opportunities Commission in 2007 in the UK, they argue that despite of girls consistently outperforming boys at all levels of the UK education system, this does not necessarily help women into well paid jobs. I'd like to read that again. According to the Equal Opportunity Commission in 2007 from the UK, despite of the fact that, I mean, we have statistical support for this, despite of the fact that female students keep on doing better than male students at all the levels through and through throughout their education, why is it that they do not get into well paid jobs? I mean, relatively, if you compare them with male students, male graduates, why is it that females still do not end up getting good jobs? This suggests that one cause of the variation between achievement and occupation, we're talking about a variation between achievement and occupation, is gender stereotyping. The stereotypical manner in which different subjects are either considered to be masculine subjects or are considered to be feminine subjects, right? The idea that boys and girls have different educational and occupational aptitudes, right? Why is it that you do not see many female students doing math and physics, right? A tiny toony thing that I like to add up without taking a lot of time. Career aspirations over here play a very important role. It's there next. It is there next. I didn't realize. So career aspirations over here play a very important role over here as well, right? I logged the meeting. Okay, okay. Give me a minute, beta. Okay. Now read through this. Jibit, are we done reading this? Are we done reading this? Okay. Shalaji, we're talking about. Okay, I'll wait, no problem. Chale beta, Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Now, we're talking about career aspirations here, and what I had said was when we talk about these career aspirations, if young boys see adults from their same gender being good, doing well with accountancy, doing well with engineering, they might as well want to join those professions, which would eventually affect their subject choices at a younger age. And so is the case with females. According to McKinsey study, 45% of girls were allocated to caring placements, but these did not always reflect their choices. In other words, despite of these subjects not being, or caring professions not being the girls or female students first choices, they were still placed, or they were still put into, or they were still given those subjects, right? So is the case with boys. Boys who did not get their preferred placement tended to be allotted to occupations that were considered as either neutral or traditionally male subjects. Girls who were unsuccessful in their preferred placements were allotted to traditionally female occupations. In other words, we're talking about blaming the system as well. We're talking about how the system again is considered to be responsible for for channeling, or for streamlining different occupations, different future occupations for students at a younger age through career counseling, through subject choice, subject choices. Right now, moving on. According to Campmeyer, while there are great opportunities for stereotyping and segregation in vocational training because of a relatively narrow range of occupational types covered, academic education does not necessarily guarantee a lack of stereotyping and segregation too. In other words, it's not only vocational education to be blamed over here. This stereotypical segregation in terms of masculine and female subjects happens with the students who opt for the academic route as well. Across Europe, gender segregation in the labor market has not been considerably reduced during the last decades. As for a typical male and female occupations such as electricians and nurses, even today, if you, I mean, this happens a lot in Pakistan. I'm sure you haven't come across any female electrician, or I mean, there are male nurses today, but typically it is considered to be a female job. Moving on, vocational education has been accused of reinforcing gender and class stereotypes and divisions amongst pupils, whereas academic education, on the other hand, does not necessarily direct males and females into particular forms of work at a relatively early age. Right? This is a counter to what we discussed earlier. In other words, summing it up, vocational education does it more. The academic education route does it too, but not as severely as the vocational education system does this. If we move on, let's talk about uh, horizontal segregation. I'd like to bring in the idea of horizontal segregation over here when it comes to different subject choices. Horizontal, right? This vertical, this is horizontal. Horizontal segregation. There are different set of subjects that are considered to be good for males, and there are different set of subjects that are considered to be good for females, right? Not only that, if we have a look at the study that was conducted by Best, Leslie Best, according to Best, even if you talk about reading themes or reading stories, that the reading text that schools provide students to read at a very young age, right? What Best found was that majority of the books showed male students playing the dominant role and female students, no, males playing the dominant roles and females playing the subordinative roles, right? And this in a very subtle manner does end up affecting what a student thinks about himself or herself in the future. That would affect their self-perception, the self-perception that they hold about themselves, right? Although female horizons have widened over the past 25 years, feminists argue that traditional assumptions about masculinity and femininity continue to influence both family and work relations in areas such as the following: textbook and gendered stereotyping. I just explained this. Number two, subject hierarchies. You know what? The subjects that are usually dominated by male students get to be at the top when it comes to hierarchical positioning of subjects, right? And the subjects that are dominated by females, on the other hand, they stand to be at a lower position as compared to the subjects that are dominated by males, right? Now, subject hierarchies, both teachers and students quickly appreciate that's not chat, that's that some subjects are more important than others, both within the formal curriculum such as English, math and science, and outside the curriculum subjects not considered worthy of inclusion. And hence, knowing the argument here is that gendered hierarchy reflect these subject hierarchies, with male choosing higher status subjects in far greater numbers, and these higher status subjects eventually result in higher status employment positioning or higher status jobs, more prestige, that have more of prestige and a better lifestyle to offer. Right now, okay, one more thing. Wherever you come across this icon, these books that you have over here, that shows that this is not a part of your Cambridge Indoors book. This is extra information, so you might as well give it a read. Right now, if I oh, I opened up. If we take this a step further and if we talk about what Fiona Norman has to say, remember we're discussing all of this under the heading of cultural reproduction. We're discussing all of this under the heading of cultural reproduction. And we had, while discussing cultural reproduction, what I had said was we'd initially talk about ethnocentric curriculum, then we talk about gendered curriculum, and then we talk about the hidden curriculum, right? And right now we are discussing all of this under the heading of gendered curriculum, right? I'm sure you do understand and realize we couldn't possibly fit in everything into a single slide, and that is why this might look not categorized properly, but it actually is, right? We're discussing gendered curriculum. All of this that we're discussing since the last few slides, it's under the heading of gendered curriculum, right? Now, when we talk about Fiona Norman in 1988 argued that teachers' expectations at a very early age emphasize females' roles related to mothers and carers, right? Now, the expectations that teachers had. Okay, one more thing that I'd like to bring into your attention. This is 1988, 98, 2008, 2018, and 3 more years now. That's got about 33 years back. 33 years back, right? Now, the extent to which whatever Fiona Norman claimed to be like back in 1988, if you compare that with today, things would be different, right? But then again, this is important and we should know this, and at the same time we should keep in mind, we should be smart enough to be able to scrutinize all of this as well. Now, moving on, according to Fiona Norman, like I just said, teachers play a very important role when it comes to showing students a direction towards their future based on the gender they belong to, right? While females may no longer automatically see their primary roles as one of caring for the family, work roles continue to be based around the idea of different male and female capabilities, both mental and physical. And this eventually does result in gendered subject choices. There are numerous other factors that we could bring in a contribution just to help you scrutinize this in a better manner. It's not only one factor. I mean, gender again is a factor, but it's not only one factor that has an overall impact on subject choices. There are numerous others, such as the social class you belong to, your region, religion, your ethnicity. All of these, I mean, it's more like a holistic view. Have a picture at this through, if you try to look at it through a holistic view, you'd see that it's not as simple as it apparently looks like. And there are numerous factors that together have a contribution towards the subject choice of students. Not to forget your in school factors play a very important role over here as well. Like we just discussed, your teachers, your school management, your fellow pupil, your peer group, your own family background, all of them, they do end up affecting your gendered subject choices, right? And yeah, if you talk about the cross cultural comparison, the way things are in the Western world, in the more developed countries like the UK, if you compare them with how things are in our part of the world, in South Asian countries, again, over here, if anything, despite of the changes that the society overall has been experiencing, if anything, a female is expected to play both the roles simultaneously, and that sort of limits the amount of opportunities and options that a female student can, which would eventually turn into a woman, would put to use, right? Now, moving on, I hope everyone's understood Fiona Norman. I'd like to discuss the third factor under the heading of the link between education and cultural reproduction, and this happens to be our hidden curriculum. So the role your hidden curriculum now plays in terms of your cultural reproduction, right? We're discussing this under the heading of cultural reproduction, and we've discussed how your ethnocentric curriculum could have an impact. We've discussed how your gender could have an impact in terms of reproducing the same culture. And now we talk about how your hidden curriculum has its impact. To start off with, what exactly is your hidden curriculum? As we or when we talk about hidden curriculum, your hidden curriculum has to do with the experiences that you have from school that are not a part of your curriculum, your formal curriculum. Like I mentioned earlier, right now as we're doing sociology, this slide or the content on this slide is there in front of you because the Cambridge people endorsed this and they decided to be a part of your syllabus. This is something that you've been taught today. You're supposed to practice it and you're supposed to sit for an examination that revolves around this or around this, that revolves around this, yeah. However, there are so many other things that you get to learn from the education system that do not that you're not tested on, right? I mean, there are your overall school experiences. If you still don't get this, for instance, obedience to authority, right? It's too early to bring in Marxism over here, but yeah, Bowles and Gintis, remember, I keep on talking about how Bowles and Gintis, through the correspondence theory, claim that the education system is set to make students submissive, docile, workaholic, achievement oriented, uncritical. अब ये सारी चीजें, they're not a part of your syllabus. They're not a part of your formal curriculum, nor would you ever be tested on this. Unless you deviate. If you deviate, then again, you're not being tested. You'll simply be requested to leave, or the system might pick you up and throw you out. However, yeah, so hidden curriculum it is. When you talk about hidden curriculum includes the things children learn from the experience, of attending school. By Jackson in 1968, I totally like to agree to this. According to Skelton, informal, okay, now hidden curriculum is also referred to as informal education, right? Informal education involves a set of implicit messages relating to knowledge, values, norms of behavior, and attitudes that learners experience and in and through education process, right? They're implicit. You know what the word implicit means over here, right? Implicit messages that are related to knowledge, your values, your norms, your behavior, your attitude that you would experience when you're attending school, right? The hidden curriculum therefore refers to the idea that schools transmit certain value laden messages to students. Now, the idea that schools transmit certain value laden messages to students, right? Value laden, right? Filled with values, right? Whose values are we talking about? If you talk from the feminist point of view, you know what it, how it would be like. If you talk about having a look at this to the Marxist point of view, you know how it would, or it is supposed to look like, right? Now, these messages have two important dimensions: one, intended consequences; two, unintended consequences. Now, when we talk about the intended consequences are things that teachers actively and consciously pursue as learning goals. Teachers actively and consciously pursue as learning goals, such as encouraging particular values: be polite, do not discriminate, the importance of order and obedience to authority, and discouraging others from bullying and sexism through questioning the role of authority of a teacher to lack of effort or attendance. Right? Now, moving on. I mean, a part of this is what I was discussing a couple of minutes back as well. The little motivational, if it was, note. Now, moving on, if we talk about unintended consequences, right, includes the messages pupils receive through the teachers and learning processes that were I mean, they aren't apparently intended to be delivered that way, but it ends up being like that. For instance, at school, as much as sexist attitude is what do you call it, discouraged, overall what students feel is that yes, there are differences. Right? Now, that's an unintended consequence that students get to learn from the education system. Right? However, another example of this could be, students, like I was discussing a couple of minutes back, students from ethnic minority backgrounds, they do study about how there shouldn't be racism or discrimination, but then again, even through the experience they have from school, quite a lot of them do feel like this is something that does happen. Right? Now, this includes status messages as well. Let's highlight this with green, such as whether boys appear to be more valued than girls, whether members of ethnic majority are to be valued more than members of ethnic minority, and messages related to the beliefs about ability. Right? How capable you are, whether teachers believe it is natural or the product of a hard work, for example. All of this is instilled to you. Now, like I was mentioning a couple of minutes back, that it's your hard work. I remember when I was saying there are little goals we set, and we need to meet those goals on a daily basis to be able to get to where we want to get. Right? Now, I hope this is clear. If I take this a step further, in general, the messages transmitted within schools are part of a hidden curriculum. They fall into two broad categories. Number one, we talk about socialization messages, and number two, we talk about status messages. This is the second one that we'd speak about in a bit, and this is the first one, that is socialization messages. This one, right? Now, as we refer to socialization messages over here, this relate to what is required from pupils if they're succeeding in education. Some ideas refer explicitly to how pupils should behave. These include various classroom practices that involve order and control, maintaining order and control in a classroom, being towards your attendance, towards your punctuality. Others, whereas, relate to things pupils must demonstrate in order to learn how to learn, learning how to learn. Now, there are many students who come up saying, "Sir, how do you want me to go about with it?" Like I keep on saying, sociology, a subject, has a lot to do with reading and writing. This is step one. You're learning this, right? Step two, you should be taking notes with this alongside, right? And then you look for questions, and then you practice questions. Right? Your first answer, remember, my kids, would never be your first best answer. To get to your best answer, you still need to get started with the first. Right? Learning how to learn. Right? All of this is, or can be, discussed under the heading of socialization messages. In part, this involves learning conformity to formal school rules as well. This is instilled to you at school as well. You need to behave, you need to attend classes, you need to follow the directions, the rules and regulations that are set up by your school. All of this is a part of you getting educated. Right? Now, however, it also means understanding the informal rules, beliefs, and attitudes perpetuated through the socialization process, such as recognizing the teacher's authority and not questioning what is being taught. All of this is instilled through the education system as well. Now, I was the one who put it in front of the students that, okay, listen, this is the syllabus we're studying now. This is a syllabus that was there earlier, right? Students are directly or indirectly made to recognize and realize the authoritative role a teacher has to play, right? They're taught not to question a teacher's authority, the system's supremacy, right? Children also learn ideas about individualism, right? Competition and knowledge. Now, individualism, learning is a process that should not ultimately be shared. All of you sitting over here listening to whatever I'm saying, a few of you might be friends as well. Tomorrow, when you're sitting for your papers, it's you who can only help yourself, no one else can, which is again going to reflect on your results, inshallah. Let's hope they'd be good in August. Competition, right? Competition, the objective is to demonstrate you're better than your peers through various types of testing. Assessment on also an integral part of the hidden curriculum, because it suggests knowledge is only useful it can be quantified. Right now, the amount of knowledge you have, we discussed this in the last class and the class before this as well, right? Knowledge ultimately has to be quantified. If knowledge is not being quantified, I wouldn't say it's of no use, but you cannot officially get it recognized until unless it's quantified, right? Number three, knowledge to pass exams, the pupil must conform to what the teacher presents as valid knowledge, right? Now, like I say, a student is expected to write according to the demands of the question that are set by the Cambridge Assessment International Examination System, right? Now, you need to understand, you need to accept, you need to adapt to it the way they're expecting you to go about with it, right? For instance, I mean, prior to this, you used to have a 9 marker and a 16 marker for education. Look at how things have changed. Now you have an entirely new paper, a separate paper that deals with education alone. I hope everyone gets this. Moving on, if we talk about status messages relate to the idea that pupils develop about their worth. Now, the messages, the idea that students in this case develop about what they're worth of, that has a lot to do with the type of school a child is attending. There are certain schools that are there in Karachi. I mean, you know how the students who perform or who attend those schools, they have a very different perception about themselves as compared to others. Likewise, we could talk about practices such as segregating, the segregation that is done at schools on the basis of streaming, setting, banding, how you categorize students into different groups. There are students that are at times openly or at times in a indirect, and subtle manner made to believe how they're better than others or the other way around. And the idea about, if we're talking about status messages over here, right now, the idea that academic knowledge is somewhat superior to vocational knowledge, all of this, they have to do with your worth. Of course, if you're going to a school, a fee paying school, amazing school, you would have a different perception about yourself. Your self image would change, right? Likewise, when you talk about these bands, if you are from the top band and if you're not from the top band, that again makes a difference, right? Number three, if you talk about academic and vocational knowledge comparison, if you are a part of, since you all are a part of academic education, the academic route over here, that changes your perception about yourself, your worth, right? I hope everyone has understood socialization messages and status messages quite well. Moving on, let's talk about the concept of culture, or cultural capital, as put forward by Pierre Bourdieu. Now, what exactly is your cultural capital? What do you know about cultural capital? When we talk about cultural capital, the simplistic way through which you could put this is this: the non-economic factors that either help or hinder an individual's chances, right? Now, your cultural capital, according to Pierre Bourdieu, the pupils from a privileged background, the middle class background get a push start from a very young age. They get extra support from a very young age, right? They get to have the facilities, their exposure, experience, the way they communicate, their linguistic skills, their attitude towards education, their home background complementing their school background. All of this gives them an upper edge over the pupils from the working class background. I hope we get this. And at one extreme where we have cultural capital, on the other we have cultural deprivation, right? Cultural, when we use the term cultural capital, we usually use or refer to this term when we're talking about members of the middle class background, and the other term cultural deprivation is used for members from the working class background, right? I just want everyone to read through this. Minded, this is not from your book, this part. This is not from your book. This, right, this is nonetheless helpful. Now, this, if you're done reading with this, we're talking about how cultural capital plays a significant role. And according to Pierre Bourdieu, the cultural reproduction that Althusser had mentioned earlier, today as we speak, it happens in a more varied and subtle manner. And when you talk about cultural capital, like I said, this refers to the different advantages and disadvantages that are granted or conferred by people's cultural histories. It was initially developed to explain differences in educational achievement in terms of a range of non economic factors and the help or hinder individuals' life chances. These include family history or status, the extent to which family members invest time. Now, that again matters too. The extent to which family members invest time and effort in their children's social and educational development. Now, it's not only your educational development, along with that, it's a social development too. Remember the factors like linguistic factors, communication, and all that we were referring to a couple of minutes back. From this perspective, cultural reproduction works in the background of education system. That's nice one. It works in the background of education system. It is not its main or its only purpose, but it's a significant purpose for those who understand and exploit the system, right? You need to understand and exploit it. And of course, we're discussing all of this under the heading of the neo-Marxist perspective, the Marxist perspective, and Pierre Bourdieu is one. Now, over here, I'd like to talk about some cultural differences and how they have an impact, right? I'd want to talk about Indo-Fijians. Fiji is a country, and if we talk about Indo-Fijians, we're talking about the Indians who have moved to Fiji a couple of decades back, right? Now, I'll discuss this first and then we'd go about with what is here on the slide. If we talk about Fiji, like I said, Fiji is a country, and if I talk about Indo-Fijians, we're talking about people from Indian origins who probably migrated half a century back, if not before. These people, how is it that they are different, right? We talk about how Indo-Fijians are different from local Fijians, right? To help you understand this, we're talking about a difference between Indo-Fijians with, if I compare them with local Fijians, all of them living in Fiji, right? Now, the thing is, if we talk about individuals from South Asian origins like India, Indo-Fijians, Indo-Fijians or us South Asians, we rely a lot on education, right? The formal education system. You've seen how people from our background, South Asian background, they end up doing so well. I mean, there is a lot, right? Because to remind you, we generally talk about ethnic minorities not doing well, but not every ethnic minority has to be considered or to be taken in the same or similar manner. We have ethnic minorities like South Asians or the Asians, the concept of tiger mothers, they end up doing quite well, at times better than local UK, what do you call it, citizens too. uh, Getting back to this Indo-Fijians wala example, the idea over here is the ideology, the cultural significance that is given to the education system or getting educated is different for Indo-Fijians if you compare them with local Fijians. right? You'd see how Indo-Fijians, they sorry, place a higher value on education, and on the other hand, their culture, on the other hand, if you talk about local Fijians, they do not end up, I mean, we discuss all of this over here, I'll highlight it so that it gets easier for you. We talk about Indo-Fijians here, and we talk about ethnic Fijians, or as I was referring to them as local Fijians. I'll just write it down. Right now, if you talk about Indo-Fijians, they place a high value on education, as they consider this the only way to succeed. In this respect, their cultural orientation is pretty individualistic. Their cultural orientation is individualistic, meaning that parents interpret their roles as one of helping and encouraging their children to achieve qualifications. On the other hand, in total contrast, if we talk about local Fijians, they have a greater communal orientation, right? We're talking about a difference over here. Look at the difference. We talking about individualistic orientation, and over here we're talking about a communal orientation, right? Parents think it is more important to encourage children to become good members of the community, somewhat at the expense of the children's education. So the local Fijians over here are more inclined towards the communal uplift for the society. They want their children to be recognized, or to be seen, or to be identified as better members for the community, right? And at times it ends up somewhat taking a toll on their educational journey or educational qualifications too. Otsuka concludes, Otsuka from here all the way, Otsuka concludes that one consequence of this different parental orientation is that individual students generally become generally have better educational background, or better, they end up doing better in terms of education as compared to their ethnic Fijian counterparts or local Fijian counterparts, right? Bourdieu is critical of the idea that schools operate along meritocratic lines. I mean, this is the third time in a row, the third class in a row when we're discussing this. According to Pierre Bourdieu, meritocracy is a myth, right? Because in this context, because differences in cultural capital influence both the relative starting point of the students as they enter the education system, and the relative progress through that system. This should be that, right? Now we talking about, one, we spoke about the starting point. Let me mark it for you, the starting point. And then we talk about relative progress while you're a part of the system, right? Now, as we talk about the starting point over here, or when we talk about the starting point over here, how is it that we claim that right from the beginning, even before a child goes to school, how is it that a child from a middle class background ends up benefiting from the system? To put it in a simplistic manner, remember when I say the middle class background of a child ends up complementing the school environment, right? The home background for a middle class child ends up complementing the school environment, which is not at all true for the working class child. A working class child might experience a cultural clash. A working class child might experience alienation as they join school, because the culture, the environment that they've had at home happens to be very different from the environment that they have at school, right? The cultural capital that middle and upper class children bring to their education gives them a distinct advantage. The upper edge, as the word that I was referring. Crozier et al. 2004 noted how middle class parents were able and willing to invest more time. They were able and they were willing to invest more time, money, and effort in their children's education than the working class peers. I hope this helps and makes sense. According to another research from Mauritius, middle class parents exploited their knowledge. This happens pretty much everywhere. Middle class parents exploit their own knowledge and understanding how the high levels of education system work. Now, see, you know, a child from a middle class background, their parents are probably educated too, and they know and understand the significance of the education overall for the future success of the child. And since their more and better equipped than their working class counterparts. They're in a position to, based on the knowledge that they hold about the system, they're in a position to help their child in a better manner, which again wouldn't be wrong if we consider that as a form of exploitation. They know how to go about. For instance, if a child from a middle class background applied for admission to school and the child did not get through, the middle class parent would know exactly how to appeal against the decision, and they'd somehow find a way through which they could make it work for the child. I hope you all get this, hopefully. Now, moving on, another concept that I'd like to discuss over here, habitus, comes from the word habitat. And I'm assuming everyone sitting over here knows what the word habitat means: the environment in which a group lives and flourishes. Your habitat. Remember when I was speaking about the home background complementing the school background? Here it is, right? Bourdieu believed that schools are the natural habitat of the middle and upper classes. The working class child entering a middle class institution immediately the working class child entering a middle class institution immediately feels disadvantaged because their interests, beliefs, values, and norms are not different but actively conflict. They're not only different, but they at times actively conflict with both the teachers and the education system, which results in a cultural clash. Things that they get to see at home, things that they get to experience at home, things that they get to experience or witness by merely being a part of a particular community. If you see it's not in line with what is there at the school, you would experience a cultural clash. This not only leads to eventual relative failure in academic terms, but the failure appears to be their own fault. This appears to be their own fault because they couldn't just adjust to the system, because they couldn't adapt the values, the attitudes that were essential for them to progress within the system. No one over here talks about how the system was designed. If I scrutinize this a bit, if I mean the people who develop the system, since we're studying all of this under the heading of the factors that influence the curriculum development, right? And not only curriculum development, the factors or the authorities that develop the entire system, right? When you do know that quite a chunk of individuals who be a part of this education system belong to the working class, you might as well develop a system that is in line with their cultural values too. I mean, of course, if the entire education system is set up according to the needs and requirements of a middle class or an upper class background, that is leaving no other option but for the working class pupil to be a misfit in the system. And not only would this result in a failure, because there's a lot more that is expected from a child from the working class to do, and not only would they be misfits for the system, but this failure that they experience would eventually be considered to be a mistake of their own. However, on the other hand, a middle class child, you've seen how kids these days, even in our part of the world, kids speak English, and they are well acquainted with whatever is necessary and essential for them to be able to fit into the education system. And this starts way before the child even joins school. In this case, does this heading of habitus make sense over here? The environment that you're trying to be a part of, if it is in line with your environment, of course it gets easier for you to fit in. If not, you know how it goes about, right? Now, middle class children, however, are immediately advantaged because their cultural beliefs, norms, and values are similar to those of the teachers and the general approach of their school. Just as different classes have different access to financial resources, they also have different access to cultural resources in the shape of cultural capital. I'd like to highlight this as well, this part. Now, moving on, according to Light, Light refers to cultural capital as the fluency in a society's elite culture or high cultural knowledge that ultimately redounds to the owner's financial and social advantage. Knowledge is instrumental in cultural reproduction, but this refers more to knowledge acquired about schooling than knowledge acquired in schools. This is a fancy one over here. This cultural reproduction has more to do with the knowledge that you've acquired about the system. Once you understand the system, you're able to go about with it the way you want to, right? According to Light, in this context, the knowledge that is acquired about the education system is more important than the knowledge that is acquired being a part of the education system. In other words, it is about knowing how to play the education system successfully. And in this case, by now everyone should understand we're talking about how the middle and the upper class, they're in a better position to play the education system in a successful manner. Cultural capital therefore takes numerous forms, but it's acquired. Light argues in the family and formal schooling. In this respect, when the school curriculum reinforces the home curriculum, as it routinely does for children of the affluent, students obtain additional access to their own culture in school. Whatever the value systems are, the belief systems are that are introduced to a child from the middle and the upper class, the fluent class, the elite class at home is further reinforced at school. They get access to a bit more of what they already do know. Conversely, when the school curriculum contradicts or subverts the home culture, we're talking the working class over here, as it does for poor, immigrant, or ethnic minority children, students have to master a foreign culture at school while mastering their own at home. Remember, a cultural clash. The students are expected, because at home, just because a child from working class goes to a particular school, that doesn't at all mean he or she at a very young age would be able to bring in a change in their home cultural values, the cultural values that are followed at home. I mean, that's another thing, but we can definitely bring that in over here. I mean, why do they need to? We discuss all of this, we talk about this under the heading of language that was what do you call it, put forward by Bernstein, the language codes, elaborated codes, and the restricted codes. We discuss all of that. But the thing is, are we expecting a young child at a very tender age to not only get familiar but adapt and master two different cultures? Read through this. Now that we're done with topic number 5.3, these are a few questions. If you want to take a screenshot of this, you may. You are very strongly advised to attempt these, and yeah, the more you practice, the better you keep on getting at it. Thank you, everyone. You have all been amazing.
No questions, sir.
No questions. So yeah, we're pretty much that's pretty much it. We are done for the day. Take good care of yourselves. I hope all of this helped. I'd like to repeat and remind the list of questions that I gave you. Try attempting them, and yeah, have an amazing Sunday. Take good care of yourselves, and Allah Hafiz.